My brother said I'd never be missed if I disappeared, so I vanished with all the family money, and now they're begging me to come back, but it's too late. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. The words left his mouth so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. We were sitting around Mom and Dad's mahogany dining table, the one that had hosted every major family event for the past 20 years. Thanksgiving was 3 days away, and the discussion had turned to seating arrangements. My sister-in-law Claire was insisting her mother needed to sit near the head of the table, which meant someone had to move. Emma can sit in the kitchen, my brother Derek suggested with that trademark smirk I'd seen my entire life. Honestly, if she disappeared tomorrow, would anyone here even notice? The table went silent. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Dad cleared his throat but said nothing. Claire actually giggled. My younger brother Tyler looked down at his plate, and I watched his jaw clench, but he didn't speak up either. I felt the blood drain from my face, that familiar tightness in my chest that always came when Derek decided to remind everyone of my place in the family hierarchy. But this time, something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked, like ice on a frozen lake right before it gives way completely. You're right, I said quietly, setting down my napkin with deliberate care. I don't think anyone would notice. Derek laughed. That booming sound he'd perfected in college when he learned it made him seem confident and in control. See? Even Emma agrees. She's practically invisible anyway. What my family didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask about in the 10 years since I'd quietly taken over managing the family finances, was that I had access to everything. Every account, every investment, every trust fund. Dad had handed it all over when his arthritis got too bad to type passwords, and Mom had been too busy with her charity events to care about the details. I was 32 years old, the middle child, the forgotten one. Derek was the golden boy, a real estate developer who talked a big game, but whose business ventures had a curious habit of requiring family bailouts. Tyler was the baby, still finding himself at 28, which apparently meant playing in a band that performed at dive bars twice a month. And then there was me, Emma, the accountant, the boring one, the one who never caused drama, never demanded attention, never made waves, the invisible one. I should go, I said, standing up. My hands weren't shaking yet, but I knew they would be soon. I have some work to finish. On a Sunday night, Mom finally spoke, her tone suggesting I was being deliberately antisocial rather than deeply hurt. Emma, honestly, you work too much. When are you going to focus on finding a husband? Yeah, Derek added, already reaching for more wine. You're not getting any younger. Pretty soon you'll be the crazy cat lady of the family. I don't have any cats, I said softly. Give it time, Claire muttered, and Derek laughed again. I drove home in a daze, my hands finally shaking on the steering wheel. 25 minutes through Sunday evening traffic to reach my small apartment in a neighborhood my family considered quaint, which was their polite way of saying not good enough. I'd bought it with my own money, refusing their offers to help with a down payment because I knew every dollar from them came with strings attached. Inside, I stood in the middle of my living room and looked around at my life. Modest furniture I'd picked out myself, bookshelves filled with financial journals and murder mysteries, a small kitchen where I ate dinner alone most nights, photos on the wall of friends I'd made at work, at my book club, at the coffee shop I frequented, people who actually valued my company, but no family photos. I'd stopped displaying those years ago, after I realized I was always on the edge of the frame, slightly out of focus, easily cropped out. I made tea with trembling hands, trying to process what had happened. It wasn't the worst thing Derek had ever said to me, not by a long shot. There was the time he'd told everyone at my college graduation party that I'd only gotten into a state school because they had to accept a certain number of mediocre students. The time he'd announced at my 30th birthday dinner that I was having a quarter-life crisis because I'd cut my hair short. The countless smaller jabs about my appearance, my career choice, my lack of romantic relationships, my apartment, my car, my everything. But this felt different. This wasn't just Derek being Derek. Mom and Dad had sat there silently. Tyler hadn't defended me. Even Claire, who'd only married into this family 3 years ago, felt comfortable mocking me. If she disappeared tomorrow, would anyone here even notice? I opened my laptop and stared at the screen. Then I did something I'd never done before. I logged into the family accounts not as their trusted financial manager, but as someone seeing them with new eyes. The family betrayal had been building for years, but tonight it crystallized into something tangible. Our parents had $12 million in various accounts. Derek thought he had access to his trust fund of $1.8 million, the early inheritance Dad had given him to invest in his future. Tyler had $700,000 in his account, money he was supposedly saving for when he figured things out. There was the family property account, the vacation home funds, the emergency reserves, and then there was my account, $300,000, less than Tyler's, despite the fact that I was the only one with an actual career, less than a quarter of what Derek had been handed. When I'd asked about it once, Dad had explained that boys needed more financial security to support future families, and that I'd probably marry someone who would take care of me. That was 5 years ago. I hadn't brought it up since. Now I sat in my kitchen, drinking tea that had gone cold, and realized something profound. I didn't just have access to these accounts as a manager. When Dad had set everything up, he'd made me a joint owner on every single one. Something about making sure someone could handle things if anything happened to him. He'd done it casually, signing papers his lawyer had prepared, probably not even reading the fine print, which meant legally, every dollar in these accounts was as much mine as it was theirs. The thought made my hands start shaking again, but this time it wasn't from hurt. It was from possibility. I spent the next 4 hours researching searching, not just researching, planning. I looked up financial regulations, consulted legal documents I'd filed away years ago, cross-referenced account terms and conditions. I created spreadsheets, mapped out scenarios, calculated risks. By 2 in the morning, I had a plan. By 4, I'd made my decision. My family thought I was invisible. They thought I could disappear without anyone noticing. They had no idea how right they were about to be. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. I'd never used a sick day in the 7 years I'd been at Henderson Financial Services. My boss, Martha, sounded genuinely concerned and told me to take the whole week if I needed it. I told her I'd let her know. Then I started making withdrawals, not all at once. That would trigger alerts, freeze accounts, bring everything crashing down before I could finish. No, I was strategic. I transferred money between accounts in ways that looked like normal rebalancing. I moved funds into short-term investments that I then immediately liquidated. I used the financial authority they'd given me to authorize wire transfers to new investment opportunities that were actually accounts I'd opened in my own name at banks across the country. It took 3 days, 3 careful, methodical days of moving money in ways that wouldn't immediately raise red flags. I knew the systems too well. I'd set them up. I knew exactly how long it would take for monthly statements to generate, for automated alerts to trigger, for anyone to notice something was off. The toxic family dynamics that had made me invisible were now my greatest asset. Nobody called to check on me. Nobody wondered why I wasn't answering messages in the family group chat. Derek was too busy with his latest development project. Tyler was preparing for a major gig at some bar downtown. Mom and Dad were coordinating Thanksgiving preparations. By Wednesday evening, I had successfully moved $11.7 million into accounts only I could access. I left exactly enough in the family accounts to cover the immediate Thanksgiving expenses. Call it a parting gift. Let them have their perfect holiday dinner, their expensive wine, their elaborate celebration. They'd earned it. On Thursday morning, Thanksgiving Day, I loaded the last boxes into my car. I'd spent the previous evening packing with military precision. Clothes, important documents, a few treasured books, my laptop, the bare essentials. Everything else I left behind. The furniture could stay, the kitchen supplies could stay. None of it mattered. What mattered was the encrypted USB drive in my purse containing every financial document, every transaction record, every piece of evidence that what I'd done was completely legal. Joint account holder, authorized signer, financially responsible party. The lawyers they'd inevitably hire would find nothing but my name on every dotted line. I'd already secured a short-term rental in Portland, Oregon, 2,600 miles away. Far enough that they couldn't just show up on my doorstep. A city where I'd never been, where nobody knew me, where I could figure out what came next without my family's toxic influence poisoning everything. My phone started ringing at exactly 9:43 that morning. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. Then Dad called. Declined. Derek called 3 times in rapid succession. Declined, declined, declined. The texts started pouring in. Where are you? Call me immediately. What have you done? This is theft. You're going to prison. How could you do this to your family? That last one was from Mom. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stopped at a gas station right before the Oregon border and checked my messages one final time. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 12 voicemails I had no intention of listening to. Derek had apparently called the police, but they'd explained that as a joint account holder, I'd committed no crime. That text was particularly satisfying. It came from Tyler, who wrote that Derek had smashed a lamp when the police told him there was nothing they could do. There was only one message I responded to. Tyler had sent it separately from the family chaos. Emma, are you okay? Please just tell me you're safe. I wrote back, I'm safe. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but you all made it clear I wouldn't be missed, so I'm giving you what you wanted. Then I turned off my phone, threw it in a dumpster behind the gas station, and pulled out the new phone I'd bought with cash 2 days earlier. New number, new life, new Emma. The sibling rivalry that had defined my childhood was over. I'd won by refusing to play anymore. Portland welcomed me with gray skies and drizzle. Perfect. The rental apartment was small but clean, in a quiet neighborhood where people minded their own business. I spent the first week doing nothing but sleeping and eating takeout and processing what I'd done. The inheritance drama I'd created would probably destroy what was left of my family's relationships with each other. Derek would blame our parents for giving me access. Our parents would blame Derek for driving me away. Tyler would be caught in the middle, probably questioning everything he thought he knew about family loyalty. And me? I was 2,600 miles away, with enough money to never work again if I chose not to. Finally free from the people who'd made me feel worthless for 32 years. My brother had been right about one thing. I had disappeared. He'd just been dead wrong about nobody noticing. The first month in Portland passed in a strange blur of freedom and guilt. Freedom because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't managing anyone's crisis but my own. Guilt because 32 years of family conditioning doesn't disappear overnight, no matter how much you tell yourself you made the right choice. I found a therapist. Dr. Sarah Chen had an office in a converted Victorian house with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that didn't feel like a sterile medical environment. During our first session, when I explained what I'd done, she didn't look shocked or judgmental. She just nodded and asked, "How do you feel about it?" Like I committed the perfect crime. I admitted, except it wasn't a crime. No, she agreed. It was self-preservation. Those words hit differently than I expected. Self-preservation. Not revenge, not theft, not the cruel abandonment my family's messages had accused me of. Self-preservation. Dr. Chen specialized in family trauma, and over Over our weekly sessions, she helped me understand that the financial revenge I'd enacted wasn't really about the money at all. It was about finally having something they couldn't take from me, couldn't diminish, couldn't use to make me feel small. Your family created a toxic environment where your worth was measured entirely by how useful you were to them, she explained during our third session. The moment you stopped being useful, they made it clear you were disposable. You simply took them at their word. Meanwhile, the messages continued. I'd set up a separate email account just to receive forwarded messages from my old number, which a friend from work was monitoring for me. The volume was staggering. Derek sent an average of 15 messages a day for the first 2 weeks. Most were threats, some were bargaining. A few were attempts at emotional manipulation that might have worked on the old Emma. You've destroyed this family. One read, Mom has had to start taking anxiety medication because of you. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. You're literally killing our parents with stress. Is that what you want? What I wanted was for them to feel a fraction of the invisibility they'd made me feel my entire life. I wanted them to understand what it was like to be dismissed, diminished, and discarded, but I didn't respond. Dr. Chen and I had agreed that any response would only feed the cycle. Mom's messages were different. They started angry, full of accusations about how I'd betrayed the family trust, how I'd stolen what wasn't mine, how I'd always been jealous of Derek's success. But around week 3, they shifted. She started sending long emails about family memories. Remember when we went to Disney World when you were 9? Remember your 16th birthday party? Remember Christmas mornings? The memories were all real, but they were edited versions. She remembered Disney World as a magical family vacation. I remembered Derek pushing me into the pool and everyone laughing when I came up crying, my new glasses broken. She remembered my 16th birthday party as a wonderful celebration. I remembered her spending the entire evening discussing Derek's college applications with her friends while I cut my own cake. Selective memory is a powerful thing. Dad's messages were brief and businesslike, at least at first. He wanted to negotiate. He'd acknowledged that I had legal access to the accounts, but surely we could come to an arrangement. He'd be willing to formalize a more equitable distribution of the family assets if I'd just return the bulk of what I'd taken. I almost laughed when I read that one. More equitable. After 32 years of inequity, he wanted to negotiate equity. Tyler was the only one whose messages I actually read in full. He wasn't angry, at least not at me. His texts and emails were confused, hurt, trying to understand. Emma, what happened? Was it just what Derek said at dinner, or has this been building for years? I know I should have defended you more. I know I should have stood up to him. I'm sorry I didn't. But please, can we talk? Just you and me? I wanted to respond to Tyler. He'd been the least toxic, the least deliberately cruel. But Dr. Chen warned me that Tyler was still enmeshed in the family system. Any information I gave him would eventually make its way back to Derek and our parents, no matter how good his intentions were. You can rebuild a relationship with him later, she said, when you're stronger, when you're sure of your boundaries. Right now, you need space to heal. By the end of January, I'd started volunteering at a local nonprofit that provided financial literacy education to low-income families. It felt good to use my skills to help people who actually appreciated it. The director, Marcus, was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who'd grown up in poverty and built a successful career in nonprofit management. You're really good at this, he told me after I'd taught my third workshop. You explain complex financial concepts in ways people can actually understand. Have you considered making this a full-time thing? I hadn't. I'd been so focused on hiding, on healing, on processing everything that had happened, that I hadn't thought about what came next. But the idea took root. Meanwhile, the family drama was escalating in ways I only learned about through Tyler's occasional messages. Derek's real estate company was struggling. Apparently, he'd been using the family money as a safety net for years, taking out what he called short-term loans that he never quite got around to paying back. Without access to the accounts, several of his projects were in jeopardy. Mom and Dad had been forced to sell the vacation house in Aspen, the one Dad had bought 30 years ago, the one where we'd spent every Christmas when I was growing up, the one that held Derek's name on the deed as a future inheritance, but had been maintained entirely with family funds. Tyler had moved back home. His band had broken up, and without the regular financial support he'd been receiving, he couldn't afford his apartment. He was 30 years old and living in his childhood bedroom again. The karmic justice of it all should have felt satisfying. Instead, I felt numb. That's normal, Dr. Chen assured me. You're grieving, not for who they are, but for who you wish they could be. That's a different kind of loss. In early February, something shifted. I received an email from a law firm in Seattle. Not my family's lawyers, someone else. The message was formal, but not hostile. They represented a client who wished to remain anonymous, someone who'd heard about my situation through mutual acquaintances and wanted to discuss a potential business opportunity. I was immediately suspicious. This had to be some elaborate trap, some way for my family to track me down. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to a phone call. The lawyer, a woman named Patricia Okonkwo, explained that her client had built a successful wealth management firm specializing in family trusts and estate planning. They were expanding their educational outreach program and looking for someone with my specific background and, as she delicately put it, unique perspective on family financial dynamics. How do you know about my situation? I asked bluntly. Marcus Rivera, she said, from the nonprofit where you volunteer. He's on our advisory board. He mentioned you were doing exceptional work, and when I asked around, I learned a bit about your circumstances. I want to be clear, we're not interested in the drama. We're interested in your expertise. The job offer was generous, not just in salary, though that was impressive, but in autonomy. I'd be developing curriculum, team, leading workshops, writing educational materials about financial independence and family dynamics. I'd be helping people who were stuck in toxic family situations understand their options. I need to think about it, I said. Of course, take all the time you need. But Emma, Patricia paused. What you did took courage. A lot of people in toxic situations never find the strength to walk away, especially when money's involved. You use the tools available to you to free yourself. That's not something to be ashamed of. I ended the call feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. That night, I finally responded to Tyler. Not with details, not with explanations, but with a simple truth. I'm safe. I'm building a new life. I need you to respect that I can't be part of the family right now. Maybe someday, but not today. His response came within minutes. I understand. I'm proud of you, Em. I know I should have said that before, but I'm saying it now. You deserve to be happy. I cried for the first time since leaving. Not sad tears, not angry tears. Relief. The next morning, I called Patricia and accepted the job offer. My new position started in March. The firm, Cascade Wealth Management, occupied a sleek office building in downtown Portland with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. My corner office felt surreal. I kept expecting someone to tell me there'd been a mistake, that this space was meant for someone more important. But Patricia had been serious about the role. Within my first week, I was meeting with clients, reviewing trust documents, helping families navigate the complicated intersection of money and relationships. Many of them had stories that echoed my own, different details, but the same underlying theme of family betrayal wrapped in financial manipulation. My daughter thinks she's entitled to my house because she took care of me for 6 months after my surgery, one elderly woman told me, but she charged me rent for her guest room and kept track of every meal she made me. Now she says I owe her. My brother borrowed $200,000 to start a business, a middle-aged man explained. That was 15 years ago. He's never paid back a cent, but he shows up every Christmas expecting expensive gifts and gets offended if I don't deliver. I listen to their stories and help them establish boundaries. Legal boundaries, financial boundaries, emotional boundaries. The work was healing for them and for me. But in April, the past caught up. I was leaving the office on a Tuesday evening when I saw him, Derek, standing next to a black SUV parked across the street, his arms crossed, that familiar expression of barely contained rage on his face. My first instinct was to run back inside, to call security, to hide. But I'd spent 4 months working on not being invisible anymore, on not shrinking away from confrontation. So I walked toward him. Found you, he said as I approached. Not hello or how are you or even we need to talk. Just found you, like I was a fugitive he'd been hunting. Derek, I replied calmly, stopping 10 feet away. Close enough to talk, far enough to maintain distance. How did you find me? Does it matter? He stepped forward and I held my ground. You stole from us, Emma, from your own family. I took what was legally mine as a joint account holder. The police explained that to you. His jaw clenched. You manipulated the system. You know that's not how Dad meant for things to work when he gave you access. How did Dad mean for things to work? I asked. Was he planning to give me an equal share eventually? Or was I always meant to have less than my brothers because I'm a woman? Derek's face reddened. This isn't about gender. This is about you being selfish and vindictive. No, I corrected him quietly. This is about me finally valuing myself as much as you've always valued yourself. We stood there in the fading spring light, two siblings who'd grown up in the same house but lived completely different experiences. Mom's heartbroken, he said finally. Dad's talking about disowning you. He already did, I replied. He just never made it official. Derek's expression shifted, something flickering across his face that might have been understanding, but it passed quickly. The money's gone, isn't it? You've spent it or hidden it so deep we'll never find it. I've invested it responsibly, I said. Something you might want to try. His hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me, but he didn't. Instead, he pulled out his phone. I'm calling Dad. You're going to talk to him right now and explain how you're going to make this right. No, I said simply. I'm not. Emma, I'm not having this conversation, Derek. You found me? Congratulations. But finding me doesn't mean you get to control me anymore. I turned to walk away. We're filing a civil suit, he called after me, for financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. I stopped and looked back at him. Patricia Okonkwo is my lawyer now. Have your attorneys contact her. But Derek, you should know that every transaction I made is documented and legal. You'll lose. You'll waste more money on lawyers than you'll ever recover. And in the process, everyone will learn exactly how much financial support you've been taking from the family accounts for years. Is that really how you want this to go? His face went pale. He knew I had records. He knew I could prove that while I'd taken $11 million, he'd borrowed and never repaid over $3 million in the past decade alone. You've become cruel, he said quietly. No, I replied. I've just stopped being convenient. I walked away and didn't look back. That night, I called an emergency session with Dr. Chen. We spent 90 minutes processing the encounter, talking through my emotions, reinforcing my boundaries. How do you feel? She asked at the end. Stronger, I admitted. Scared, but stronger. That's growth, she said with a smile. The civil suit Derek threatened never materialized. Instead, I received an email from my father 2 weeks later. It was surprisingly brief. You've made your point. You're clearly not coming back. I won't fight you anymore, but don't expect to be welcomed home. I wrote back, equally brief, I don't. The sibling rivalry that had defined my childhood was truly over, but unlike the ending Derek expected, I wasn't the one who'd lost. Summer arrived in Portland with unexpected warmth. I'd been in the city for 6 months now, and slowly, painfully, I was building something that felt like an actual life, not the half-life I'd lived before. Existing in the shadows of my family's family's expectations, but something real and mine. Cascade Wealth Management was thriving, and my role had expanded beyond what Patricia had initially outlined. Word spread quickly in financial circles about the woman who specialized in family dynamics and toxic relationships. Clients specifically requested me. Other firms wanted to collaborate. I was asked to speak at conferences, to write articles, to share my expertise. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's cruelty had inadvertently made me an expert in the very thing they'd inflicted on me. "You have a gift for this," Patricia told me during a review meeting in June. "You understand the emotional component of financial decisions in a way most advisors never will. Our client satisfaction scores have increased 30% since you joined." "Thank you," I said, still uncomfortable with praise even after all this time. "I'm serious, Emma. I want to promote you to Senior Family Wealth Advisor. It comes with a significant raise and your own team." I accepted, though part of me still waited for the other shoe to drop. For someone to realize I was a fraud, that I'd built my career on running away from my problems rather than solving them. Dr. Chen assured me that was the family trauma talking. "You didn't run from your problems," she corrected during our weekly session. "You removed yourself from an abusive situation. There's a profound difference." But the guilt remained, a constant low-level hum in the background of my new life. It flared up at unexpected moments, when I saw families laughing together at restaurants, when holidays approached, when I passed by greeting card displays that showed siblings embracing. I'd created inheritance drama that had torn my family apart. Maybe Derek had been cruel, maybe my parents had been neglectful, maybe I'd been invisible, but I'd still been the one to detonate the bomb. In July, Tyler reached out again, not with accusations or pleas to return, but with something unexpected. "I left too, moved to Seattle, started fresh. I think I finally understand why you had to go. Can we meet for coffee? Just as two people who escaped, not as family." I stared at that message for 3 days before responding. Meeting Tyler felt dangerous. It felt like opening a door I'd worked so hard to close. But it also felt necessary. We met in a neutral coffee shop halfway between Portland and Seattle. Tyler looked different, thinner. His hair was shorter, and he'd traded his usual band t-shirts for a simple button-down. He looked like an adult, maybe for the first time. "You look good," he said when I sat down. "Happy. I'm working on it," I replied honestly. "You look different." "I got a job," he said, and there was pride in his voice. "Nothing glamorous. I'm managing a music store, but it's mine. I'm earning my own money for the first time in my life." We talked for 2 hours. Tyler explained that after I left, the family dynamics had collapsed completely. Without me as the invisible support system, without the financial cushion, everyone's true natures had emerged. Derek had become increasingly desperate, borrowing money from friends, making risky business decisions, alienating partners. His marriage to Claire was falling apart. Apparently, she'd signed up to marry into a wealthy family, not one teetering on the edge of financial ruin. Mom had thrown herself into volunteer work, but Tyler suspected it was more about maintaining appearances than genuine charity. She told everyone who asked that I'd had a mental breakdown and was receiving treatment. It was easier than admitting her daughter had walked away from her. Dad had retreated into silence. He went to work, came home, barely spoke. Tyler thought he was ashamed, but of what specifically, Tyler couldn't say. Ashamed of how he'd treated me, or ashamed that I'd exposed the family's dysfunction. "They made you the scapegoat," Tyler said quietly. "Everything that's wrong with the family now, they blame on you. But the problems were always there. You just stopped hiding them." "I destroyed the family," I said, voicing the fear that kept me awake some nights. "No," Tyler corrected firmly. "They destroyed themselves. You just refused to go down with them." We agreed to stay in touch, but carefully. Tyler was clear that he wasn't going to be a go-between, that he wouldn't report back to our parents or Derek about my life. He wanted a relationship with me separate from the toxic family system we'd grown up in. "I need that too," he admitted. "I need to know it's possible to be related to someone and actually like them." That meeting shifted something in me. If Tyler could walk away and rebuild, if he could acknowledge the family betrayal without excusing it, maybe I wasn't the villain after all. But just as I was finding my footing, the universe decided to test me. In August, I received a call from a hospital in Connecticut. My father had suffered a massive heart attack. He was stable, but had requested to see me. The nurse who called was apologetic, explaining that she wouldn't normally contact an estranged family member. But my father had been quite insistent. "He's been asking for you repeatedly," she said gently, "saying he needs to talk to you before it's too late." My first instinct was to refuse. This was emotional manipulation, a classic toxic family tactic. Get the wayward child to return by manufacturing a crisis. But what if it wasn't manipulation? What if my father was genuinely dying and I refused to see him, and I had to live with that choice forever? I called Dr. Chen in a panic. We had an emergency session where she helped me work through my options. "Whatever you decide, it has to be for you, not for them," she said. "If you go, go because you need closure. If you don't go because you're protecting your peace. But don't let guilt or obligation make this decision." After 2 days of agonizing internal debate, I decided to go. Not because I owed my father anything, but because I needed to face him one more time with my newfound strength. I needed to prove to myself that I could walk back into that world and come out intact. I flew to Connecticut on a Thursday morning. Tyler met me at the airport, offering moral support. We drove to the hospital in silence, my hands clenched so tightly in my lap that my knuckles turned white. Mom was in the waiting room when we arrived. She looked older, more fragile than I remembered. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Emma," she breathed. "You came." "I came to see Dad," I clarified. "That's all." Her expression expression hardened slightly. Even now, even here, there were conditions and boundaries to navigate. Dad was in a private room, hooked up to various monitors that beeped rhythmically. He looked small in the hospital bed, diminished in a way I'd never seen. The powerful patriarch who dominated every family gathering was now a frail 71-year-old man with tubes in his arms. His eyes opened when I approached the bed. "Emma," he said, his voice weak. "You're here." "I'm here," I confirmed, staying by the door. Tyler stood beside me, a silent support. "I need to tell you something," Dad said, "before it's too late." Here it comes, I thought, the deathbed apology. The moment where he asks for forgiveness, and I'm supposed to grant it because he's vulnerable. I braced myself. "Your grandfather's will," he said instead. "There's a trust." That wasn't what I expected. "What?" "My father, your grandfather. He set up a trust before he died. For you specifically. He always said you reminded him of himself, that you had his head for numbers. I was supposed to tell you when you turned 30, but I didn't." The room felt airless. "Why not?" "Because it was substantial," he admitted. $3.2 million. "I thought if you knew, you'd become independent. You'd leave the family, and I'd lose the one person who actually kept everything running smoothly." The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Not just what he'd done, but his casual admission of the motive. He'd hidden my inheritance because I was too useful to lose. "So you lied to me for 2 years," I said quietly. "You let me believe I was worth less than Derek and Tyler because you needed me to stay manageable." "I was wrong," he said. "I know that now. The trust is yours. It always was. My lawyer has the papers. You should claim it." "I don't want it," I said, surprising myself. "I don't want anything from this family anymore." Dad's face fell. "Emma, please, I'm trying to make this right." "You can't make this right," I said. "You can't fix decades of neglect and manipulation with money. That's the problem. You all think everything can be solved with money, controlled with money, measured with money, but you can't buy back my childhood. You can't purchase my forgiveness." "I'm dying," he said, and there was desperation in his voice now. "We're all dying," I replied. "Some of us just do it slower than others. I'm sorry you're sick, Dad, genuinely, but I can't give you absolution. That's not my job." Mom appeared in the doorway. "How can you be so cold?" she demanded. "Your father is lying in a hospital bed trying to reconcile with you." "He's not trying to reconcile," I corrected. "He's trying to ease his guilt before he dies. Those are different things." "You've changed," Mom said, her voice bitter. "You've become hard." "I've become honest," I replied. "Maybe if you'd all been honest with me years ago, we wouldn't be here now." Tyler touched my arm gently. Maybe we should take a break." We stepped into the hallway. I was shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. This was harder than I'd anticipated. Facing them, refusing their last-minute attempts at redemption, it required a strength I wasn't sure I possessed. "You're doing great," Tyler assured me. "You don't owe them anything." But the guilt was crushing. My father was dying, and I was refusing his attempt to make peace. What kind of person did that make me? Derek arrived 30 minutes later. He saw me in the hallway and stopped dead. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. "Now you show up? After everything?" "I came because Dad asked," I said evenly. "You destroyed this family," he hissed, stepping closer. "Our parents are broke. Do you know that? They had to sell the house. They're living in a condo now, a tiny 2-bedroom condo because you took everything." "I took what was legally mine," I corrected. "You took $3 million over the years and never paid it back. Should we discuss that?" His face reddened with rage. "That was different. That was business loans. That was entitlement," I countered. "That was thinking you deserved more because you were the golden child and I was just the convenient one." We stood there, years of sibling rivalry and resentment crackling between us like electricity. "I hope you're happy," Derek said finally. "I hope your revenge was worth it." "It wasn't revenge," I said tiredly. "It was survival." I left the hospital an hour later without seeing my father again. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit there and pretend that one deathbed confession erased 32 years of being invisible. I couldn't absolve him just to make his death easier. Tyler drove me back to the airport. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Am I a terrible person?" "No," he said firmly. "You're a person with boundaries. That's different." I flew back to Portland that evening, emotionally exhausted but strangely resolved. I'd faced them. I'd held my ground. I'd refused to crumble under the weight of their guilt and expectations. 3 days later, my father died. Mom called to tell me, her voice cold and formal. The funeral would be on Saturday. I was welcome to attend, but she hoped I wouldn't make a scene. I didn't go to the funeral. Instead, I spent that Saturday volunteering at a financial literacy workshop, teaching single mothers how to build savings accounts and protect themselves from financial abuse. It felt like a better tribute to my survival than standing in a church pretending to mourn a relationship that had never really existed. Tyler sent me photos from the service. He said it was small, mostly business associates and distant relatives. Derek gave a eulogy that painted our father as a beloved family man. Mom wore black and accepted condolences with practiced grace. And I was 3,000 miles away, living my life, refusing to apologize for my survival. The inheritance drama had cost me my family, but it had given me myself. The months following my father's death were complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. Grief, I discovered, doesn't follow logic. You can grieve for what someone could have been, should have been, even when what they actually were caused you pain. Dr. Chen and I spent weeks unpacking my conflicting emotions. Guilt for not attending the funeral, relief that I'd held my boundaries, sadness for the relationship that never existed, anger that even in death my father had tried to control me with the revelation about the trust. "You're allowed to feel all of these things simultaneously," she reminded me during a particularly difficult session in in September. Healing isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others. She was right. Some mornings I woke up feeling strong and certain. Other days I'd find myself crying in my car before work, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But life continued regardless of my emotional turmoil. At Cascade, I was promoted again, this time to Director of Family Services. Patricia wanted me to develop an entire division focused on helping families navigate complex financial dynamics. It meant hiring a team, creating training programs, building something lasting. You're turning your pain into purpose, Patricia observed during our planning meeting. That's powerful. I hired 3 advisors over the next month. Each had their own story of family betrayal, their own understanding of how money could be weaponized in relationships. We weren't just a team. We were survivors building something meaningful from our collective trauma. In October, Tyler called with unexpected news. Derek's getting divorced, he said. Claire filed 2 weeks ago. Apparently, she found out about his gambling debts. Gambling debts? I repeated, genuinely surprised. Yeah, turns out the business failures weren't just bad luck. He's been gambling heavily for years. Sports betting, poker, online casinos. He's in debt to some dangerous people, Emma. Like, seriously dangerous. This was new information. Even with all my access to the family accounts, I'd never seen evidence of gambling. Derek must have been hiding it well, using cash, keeping it separate from anything traceable. How much does he owe? I asked. Over $1 million, Tyler said quietly. He's terrified. He came to me asking for help, but I don't have anything to give him. He wanted me to reach out to you. Absolutely not, I said immediately. I told him you'd say that, Tyler replied. But Emma, these people he owes money to, they're not playing around. He's scared for his life. That's not my problem, I said. But even as I spoke, I felt the old familiar pull of family obligation, the ingrained response to fix everyone's messes, to be the responsible one, to save people who'd never saved me. I know, Tyler said, and I'm not asking you to help him. I just thought you should know what's happening. After we hung up, I sat in my office staring out at the Portland skyline. Derek was in trouble. Real, potentially life-threatening trouble. The old Emma would have found a way to help, would have convinced herself that family was family, that you didn't let family members get hurt no matter what they'd done. But I wasn't the old Emma anymore. I called Patricia and explained the situation. Am I a terrible person for not wanting to help him? I asked. Do you want my legal answer or my personal one? She replied. Both. Legally, you have no obligation to him. You're not married to him, you're not his parent or guardian, and he's an adult who made his own choices. Personally, she paused. Emma, there's a difference between refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior and being cruel. You not rescuing Derek from the consequences of his actions isn't cruelty, it's boundaries. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining Derek desperate, afraid, potentially in physical danger. I thought about the kid he'd been before he became the golden child, before our parents' favoritism had warped him into someone who believed the world owed him everything. But I also thought about every cruel comment, every dismissal, every moment he'd made me feel worthless. I thought about that dinner table, that casual cruelty. If she disappeared tomorrow, would anyone here even notice? By morning, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to help Derek financially, but I also wasn't going to do nothing. I called a contact I'd made through work, a former FBI agent who now ran a private security consulting firm. I explained the situation, and he agreed to reach out to Derek with information about legitimate debt consolidation programs and legal protections available to him. It wasn't a rescue. It was information. What Derek did with it was his choice. You're doing more than he deserves, the consultant told me when we'd arranged everything. I'm doing what I need to do to sleep at night, I corrected. November brought unexpected developments. I received a formal letter from an attorney representing my mother. She was contesting my father's estate, specifically the trust my grandfather had left me. Her argument was that since my father had never formally transferred it, the money should be considered part of his estate and divided among his heirs. I read the letter 3 times, fury building with each word. Even now, even after everything, they wanted more from me. They wanted the one thing my grandfather had left specifically for me, the only piece of family wealth that had been designated as mine alone. I forwarded the letter to Patricia, who reviewed it and laughed. She has no case, Patricia assured me. Trusts don't work that way. Your grandfather's trust was irrevocable and named you specifically. Your father's failure to inform you doesn't change the legal designation. If anything, this letter is evidence that your family continues to engage in financial manipulation. So I should fight it? I asked. Oh, absolutely, Patricia said. And I think we should countersue for the emotional distress and legal fees associated with their baseless claim. It's time to send a very clear message that you're not someone they can push around anymore. The lawsuit became a matter of principle. I had more than enough money from the accounts I'd legally taken. I didn't need the trust funds, but I needed to prove that I wouldn't be bullied, wouldn't be manipulated, wouldn't roll over just because they were family. The discovery process was brutal. My mother's lawyers requested extensive documentation of every transaction I'd made since leaving Connecticut. Patricia countered by requesting documentation of every financial decision my parents had made in the past 20 years, with particular focus on the disparate treatment between their children. What emerged was damning. Derek had received over $4.3 million in various forms over the years. Loans for business ventures, down payments on properties, covering his gambling debts when they'd discovered them previously. Tyler had received $1.2 million, mostly in smaller amounts for rent, car payments, and general living expenses. I had received saved exactly $300,000, and $200,000 of that had been for my college tuition, which I'd actually taken loans for and paid back myself. My parents had just kept the money. The financial inequality was documented, undeniable, devastating. In December, Derek's situation reached a crisis point. His gambling creditors had apparently threatened him directly. He'd gone to the police, but without actual physical harm, there was little they could do. He'd moved back in with our mother, hiding essentially, hoping the distance and my mother's presence would protect him. Tyler called me on a Tuesday afternoon, his voice shaking. "Derek's in the hospital," he said. "Someone jumped him in the parking lot of Mom's building, broke his arm and 2 ribs, left a message that this was just the beginning." My hands went cold. "Is he okay?" "Physically, he'll recover. But Emma, he's terrified. He's talking about fleeing the country, disappearing completely. Mom's hysterical. She's begging me to convince you to help." "Tyler, I'm not asking you to give him money," Tyler interrupted. "I swear. But the security consultant you connected him with, the debt consolidation programs, Derek never followed up on any of it. He thought the threats would go away on their own. Now he's desperate, and I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of a decision I'd hoped I'd never have to make. "Give him my new number," I said finally. "Tell him he can call me once. I'll listen. That's all I'm promising." Derek called 2 hours later. His voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Small and scared and very young. "Emma," he said, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything." "You don't," I agreed. "I'm sorry," he said, and it sounded genuine. "For everything. For how I treated you, for what I said at dinner that night, for all of it. You were right to leave. You were right about everything." "Derek, why are you calling?" I asked, not ready to accept his apology, not ready to process what it might mean. "I need to get out of the country," he said. "I need to disappear. But I have no money, no resources, nothing. These people, Emma, they're going to kill me if I don't come up with $1.3 million by the end of January." "I'm not giving you money," I said firmly. "I know, I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for help. You disappeared. You did it successfully. I need to know how." The request was so unexpected I almost laughed. Derek, the golden child, the successful one, the brother who'd spent our entire lives looking down on me, was asking me to teach him how to vanish. "Why would I help you?" I asked. "Because despite everything, I'm still your brother," he said quietly. "And because you're a better person than I ever gave you credit for." We talked for an hour. I didn't commit to anything, but I also didn't hang up. I asked questions about his debts, his options, his real willingness to change his life completely. By the end of the call, I'd agreed to think about it. "Derek," I said before hanging up, "if I help you, and that's a massive if, you need to understand that it's not a rescue. It's you taking responsibility for your choices and accepting help to make better ones. Can you do that?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to try." After the call, I sat in my apartment feeling torn apart. This was the climax of everything I'd been running from. Derek needed me. My mother needed me. Even dead, my father's legacy needed me to sort through the legal mess of the estate. I could refuse. I could maintain my boundaries, protect my peace, continue building my new life without looking back. That would be justified. No one could blame me. But I could also choose differently. Not because they deserved my help, but because I deserved to make decisions from a place of strength rather than pain. I could help Derek on my terms, with clear boundaries, without sacrificing myself. I called Dr. Chen and scheduled an emergency session. We needed to sort through this before I made any decisions I couldn't take back. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I'd explained everything. "I want to help him without losing myself," I admitted. "I want to prove that I can be strong and compassionate at the same time." "Is that possible?" "Yes," she said simply. "But it requires very clear boundaries and the willingness to walk away if those boundaries are violated." I spent the next week creating a plan. Not a rescue plan, but a framework for helping Derek help himself. I reached out to contacts in international finance, researched debt negotiation strategies, consulted with my security expert about witness protection adjacent scenarios. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, I called Derek back. "I'll help you," I said, "but here are my terms." I outlined a detailed plan. Derek would work with the debt consolidation experts to negotiate his debts, using documentation I'd help him gather. He'd enter a structured repayment program, even if it took him 20 years. He'd attend therapy for his gambling addiction. He'd get a real job, something that provided steady income. In exchange, I'd provide him with enough money to meet his immediate safety needs and relocate temporarily while the negotiation process played out. I'd connect him with resources and contacts. I'd offer advice and support, but not rescue. "And Derek," I added, "if you gamble again, if you fall back into old patterns, if you try to manipulate me or use our mother to get more money, I'm done, permanently. Do you understand?" "I understand," he said. "Thank you, Emma. Really, thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I replied. "The hard part is just beginning." As I hung up the phone, I realized something profound had shifted. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the family doormat. I was someone making deliberate choices about who to help and how on my own terms, from a position of strength rather than obligation. The toxic family dynamics that had defined my life were finally, truly ending. Not with dramatic cutoffs or permanent estrangement, but with radical honesty about what I would and wouldn't accept. I didn't know if Derek would follow through. I didn't know if my mother would drop the lawsuit or keep fighting. I didn't know what the future held for any of us. But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. And no one, not Derek or Mom or the ghost of my father, could take that away from me. January arrived with cold clarity. Derek followed through on his commitments, which surprised me more than it should have. He enrolled in a gambling addiction program, met with the debt consolidation specialists I'd I'd connected him with and accepted a job managing a small hardware store in Montana. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work with steady income. The negotiation with his creditors took 6 weeks of intense back and forth. With professional help and documented proof of his commitment to repayment, they agreed to a structured plan. Derek would be paying them back for the next 15 years, but he'd be alive to do it. I'm actually grateful, he told me during one of our weekly check-in calls. I know that sounds insane, but hitting rock bottom forced me to face things I'd been running from my entire life. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. Not proud of who he'd been, but proud of who he was choosing to become. Mom's still fighting the trust thing, he added carefully. She's convinced you manipulated Dad somehow, that you're stealing from the family even now. I know, I said. Patricia kept me updated on every filing, every motion, every desperate attempt my mother's lawyers made to find some angle that might work. None of them did. How is she? Bitter, Derek admitted. She sold the condo and moved into a small apartment. She blames you for Dad's death, for me leaving, for everything. I've tried talking to her, but she doesn't want to hear it. The sadness I felt at this news was distant, muted. I'd mourned my mother long before she'd physically lost me. The woman fighting this lawsuit wasn't trying to reclaim a relationship with her daughter. She was trying to reclaim control. In February, the court ruled definitively in my favor. Not only did my mother lose her claim to the trust, but the judge ordered her to pay my legal fees and issued a stern warning about filing frivolous lawsuits. Patricia had included documentation of the decades-long financial inequality between Derek, Tyler, and me. The judge had called it troubling evidence of systemic favoritism that bordered on financial abuse. Those words in an official court document felt like vindication. Not just legal vindication, but emotional acknowledgement that what I'd experienced had been real and wrong. My mother's lawyer sent a final letter requesting settlement discussions. She wanted to avoid the public embarrassment of the full trial, wanted to negotiate some kind of agreement where I'd drop the countersuit in exchange for her dropping all future claims. What do you want to do? Patricia asked. I thought about it for a long time. I could push forward, force a trial, make everything public. My mother would be humiliated. Her friends would know. The family name would be dragged through the mud. It would be complete and total financial revenge. Or I could accept her surrender and move on. Let her withdraw the lawsuit, I said finally. No settlement payment, but she pays her own legal fees. And she signs a document agreeing to never contest my inheritance or file any future claims against me. That's my offer. Take it or leave it. She took it. Within a week, the lawsuit was officially withdrawn. I received a certified letter stating that all claims had been dropped and that no further legal action would be pursued. My mother's signature was shaky on the document, but it was there. I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of finality. The inheritance drama that had torn my family apart was officially over. In March, Tyler visited Portland. We spent the weekend hiking, talking, processing everything that had happened in the past year and a half. He told me he was applying to graduate school, that he wanted to become a therapist specializing in family systems. You inspired me, he said as we sat overlooking the Columbia River. Watching you break free, set boundaries, refuse to accept the dysfunction as normal. It made me realize I could do the same thing. You didn't take any money, I pointed out. You could have. You had access to your trust. I know, he said, but I wanted to earn my own way. I didn't want to be dependent on family money that came with invisible strings attached. I needed to prove to myself that I could survive without them. We were quiet for a while, watching the water flow steadily downstream. Do you ever regret it? Tyler asked eventually. Taking the money and leaving? I considered the question honestly. I regret that it had to happen that way, I said. I regret that they couldn't love me enough to treat me fairly without force. But do I regret saving myself? No, never. Mom asks about you sometimes, he said quietly, when she thinks I'm not paying attention. She'll see something that reminds her of you, and I can see her face change. I think part of her knows she lost something precious, but she's too proud to admit it. That's sad, I said, and it was. Sad for her. Sad for the relationship we'd never have. Sad for the family we could have been if anyone had been willing to see me as I actually was. By April, my life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work was fulfilling. I'd published my first article in a major financial journal about family dynamics and wealth management. Speaking requests were coming in regularly. I'd started dating someone, a kind environmental lawyer named Marcus, who had his own complicated family history and understood why I needed to take things slowly. Derek called every Sunday evening. We talked about his job, his therapy, his progress. He was 6 months sober from gambling and attending meetings regularly. He'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in addiction and family trauma. He'd even begun making amends to people he'd hurt over the years. I wrote you a letter, he told me during one call. My therapist suggested it. It's my formal apology. Everything I should have said years ago. Can I send it to you? Yes, I said. The letter arrived a week later. It was 12 pages long, handwritten, raw and honest in ways Derek had never been before. He detailed specific moments where he'd been cruel, times he'd dismissed me or belittled me or joined in when our parents treated me as less than. He acknowledged his role in the toxic family system, how he'd benefited from it and protected it because it served him. I convinced myself that I deserved more because I was more, he wrote, that my success was proof of my superiority. But the truth is, I was just given more opportunities and more grace. You earned everything you have. I was handed everything I squandered. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to finally see that. I cried reading it. Not sad tears, but tears of release. This was what I'd needed all all along. Not money or revenge or legal victories, just acknowledgement. Just someone from my family finally seeing me and saying, "You were treated unfairly, and I'm sorry." In May, I made a decision. I called Derek and told him I wanted to help him in one more way. "The trust from grandfather," I said. "It's $3.2 million. I don't need it. I want to split it with you and Tyler." "Emma, no," Derek protested immediately. "That's yours. You earned it. After everything." "This isn't about earning," I interrupted. "It's about choosing differently than our parents did. They created inequality and called it love. I'm choosing equality and calling it healing. You're working hard to change. Tyler's building a real life. I want to support that, not because I have to, but because I choose to." We structured it carefully, with Patricia's help. Each of us would receive roughly $1 million, held in separate trusts with clear conditions. Derek's had stipulations about continued therapy and sobriety. Tyler's supported his education. Mine remained flexible, available for whatever my future held. "This is the most generous thing anyone's ever done for me," Derek said, his voice thick with emotion. "No," I corrected gently. "This is what family should have been all along." When I told Tyler, he was quiet for a long moment. "You didn't have to do this," he finally said. "I know. That's what makes it meaningful." My mother heard about the trust division through her lawyer. She sent one final message, not through official channels, but through Tyler. "Tell Emma I understand now. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her." I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late, arrive after too much damage, require more grace than I was capable of giving. Maybe someday I'd be ready to talk to her. Maybe not. Either way, it was my choice to make. In June, Cascade held a ceremony recognizing my work. They'd created an award for excellence in family financial services, and I was the first recipient. Patricia spoke about how I'd transformed not just my own life, but the lives of countless clients who'd found the courage to set boundaries because of my example. "Emma didn't just survive family betrayal," Patricia told the assembled colleagues and clients. "She transformed it into purpose. She took her pain and turned it into power, not over others, but over her own story. That's what makes her work so impactful. She understands that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, and sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose to come back on your own terms." Standing at the podium, accepting the award, I looked out at the faces watching me. Clients I'd helped, colleagues I'd trained, Tyler sitting in the back row beaming with pride, Marcus smiling encouragingly from his seat. This was my family now. Not the one I'd been born into, but the one I'd chosen, the one I'd built. 18 months ago, I said into the microphone, someone told me I was so invisible that no one would notice if I disappeared. That statement destroyed me and saved me in equal measure. It forced me to ask myself a crucial question. If I'm invisible to the people who should love me most, am I real at all? I paused, gathering my thoughts. The answer is yes, I am real. My worth exists independent of anyone else's ability to see it, and so does yours. To everyone here who's struggling with toxic family dynamics, who's been told they're not enough or too much, who's been made to feel invisible, I want you to know something. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep anyone else warm. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. And sometimes disappearing from people who can't see you is the only way to finally become visible to yourself. The applause was overwhelming. After the ceremony, people lined up to thank me, to share their stories, to tell me how my journey had inspired their own. But the most meaningful moment came when Tyler approached. "Dad would have hated that speech," he said with a smile, "which means it was perfect." "Yeah," I agreed. It was. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and looked at my bank accounts, the money I'd taken, the money I'd earned, the money I'd invested, numbers on a screen that represented security and freedom and choices. But they didn't represent my worth. They never had. My worth had always been there, waiting for me to claim it. I just had to disappear from the people who couldn't see it to finally find it myself. I thought about that Thanksgiving dinner, Derek's cruel words, the family's laughter. I thought about packing my car, transferring those funds, driving away from everything I'd known. I thought about the fear and doubt and crushing guilt that had followed me for months, and then I thought about who I was now, strong, whole, free. My brother had been right about one thing. If I disappeared, no one would notice. But I'd been right about something too. Their inability to see me had never been about my visibility. It had been about their blindness. I was done being invisible. I was done shrinking myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I was done accepting crumbs and calling it love. I had disappeared, but only from them, to everyone else, to the people who mattered, to myself most of all. I had never been more visible. And that was worth more than any inheritance, any revenge, any vindication. That was freedom. 2 years after that Thanksgiving dinner, I sat in my new office overlooking the Willamette River, reviewing applications for the fellowship program I'd created. The Emma Hartley Foundation for Financial Independence offered full scholarships to individuals from toxic family situations who wanted to pursue careers in financial planning, law, or social work. We'd funded 23 people so far, each with their own story of survival and transformation. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Dinner at 7? I'm making that pasta you love." I smiled and typed back a confirmation. Marcus had proposed 3 months ago, and we were planning a small wedding for the fall. Nothing elaborate, just close friends and the family I'd chosen. Tyler would be my man of honor. Derek had asked if he could attend, and after discussing it with my therapist, I'd agreed. He'd earned that through 2 years of consistent effort and change. My mother had not been invited. That boundary remained firm. She'd sent a card on my birthday with a check for $500 and a note saying she was proud of me. I'd donated the money to a women's shelter and thrown away the card. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, and that was okay. The lawsuit she'd filed had cost her more than money. Her social circle had learned about the financial inequality she'd enforced among her children. Several of her closest friends had quietly distanced themselves. She'd moved to Florida, Tyler told me, starting over in a retirement community where no one knew her history. I felt no satisfaction in her isolation, just a distant sadness for the woman who'd chosen pride over her daughter, control over connection, appearances over authenticity. She'd built her life on pretense and manipulation, and when it finally collapsed, there was nothing genuine left to sustain her. Derek's transformation had been the most surprising development. He'd been sober from gambling for 26 months now. He'd been promoted to assistant manager at the hardware store. He'd started dating a woman named Rachel, a teacher who knew his whole story and loved him anyway. They were taking things slowly, both of them understanding that real change took time. I'm grateful for what happened, Derek told me during his last visit to Portland. I know that sounds insane, but losing everything forced me to build something real. The old me was all image, all pretense. This me, the broke recovering addict working retail, this is the most authentic I've ever been. You're doing the work, I said. That's what matters. I see now what it must have been like for you, he continued. Growing up as the forgotten one, watching me get everything handed to me, being told your accomplishments didn't matter. I'm sorry I didn't see it then. I'm sorry I benefited from it without question. His apologies had become more specific over time, less generic and more accountable. That was real growth. Tyler had completed his first year of graduate school and was thriving. He'd found his calling in helping families navigate difficult dynamics. He volunteered at a crisis center, worked with troubled teens, wrote papers about sibling relationships and parental favoritism. His professors said he had a gift for the work, an intuitive understanding that came from lived experience. You saved my life, he told me once. Watching you walk away gave me permission to imagine something different for myself. You saved your own life, I corrected. I just showed you it was possible. At Cascade, my department had grown to 15 employees. We'd expanded our services to include support groups, educational workshops, and a crisis hotline for people experiencing financial abuse. Patricia had made me a partner in the firm, and together we were building something that extended far beyond wealth management. You've changed the culture here, she told me during our quarterly review. People come to Cascade now not just for financial advice, but for understanding, for validation that their family situations aren't normal, that they deserve better. The work was fulfilling in ways I'd never imagined. Every client who found the courage to set boundaries, every person who walked away from toxicity, every family that chose healing over hierarchy, it all felt like validation that my own journey had meaning beyond personal survival. I'd published a book titled Invisible: Breaking Free from Family Financial Abuse. It had become a surprise bestseller, resonating with thousands of people who'd experienced similar dynamics. The reviews were overwhelming, readers sharing their own stories of being the scapegoat, the forgotten child, the one who served everyone else's needs while their own went unmet. You gave voice to something we all felt but couldn't articulate, one reader wrote. Thank you for making us visible. That word, visible, still carried enormous power for me. I'd built an entire career on helping people become visible to themselves, on teaching them that their worth wasn't determined by family validation or financial equality or any external measure. On the second anniversary of my disappearance, I hosted a dinner party at my apartment. Tyler came up from Seattle. Derek flew in from Montana with Rachel. Marcus cooked because he was better at it than I'd ever be. My colleague Sarah brought wine. My therapist, Dr. Chen, stopped by for dessert. We toasted to new beginnings, to chosen family, to the courage it takes to walk away and the strength it takes to selectively come back. We told stories and laughed, and for a moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been grief for what my biological family could have been. But mostly, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for the family I'd built, for the life I'd created, for the woman I'd become in the aftermath of disappearing. I have something to say, Derek announced, standing awkwardly with his wine glass. I know I don't deserve to be here. I know the things I said and did can't be undone. But Emma, you gave me something I didn't deserve and hadn't earned. You gave me a second chance, not just financially, but emotionally. You held me accountable while still believing I could change. That's the definition of love. Real love, not the conditional bullshit we grew up with. He raised his glass higher. To Emma, the strongest person I know, the one who disappeared and found herself, the one who saved us all by refusing to save us. Everyone drank to that, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Not sad tears, not angry tears, but tears of recognition. I had saved myself, and in doing so, I'd accidentally given my brothers permission to save themselves too. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Marcus had fallen asleep, I stood at my window looking out at the Portland skyline. Somewhere out there, my mother was alone in her Florida apartment, probably bitter, possibly regretful, definitely unchanged. Somewhere there were people who still thought I was the villain of my family's story, the ungrateful daughter who'd stolen from her family and abandoned them. Let them think that. Their judgment couldn't touch me anymore. I'd learned something profound in the past 2 years. You can't force people to see you. You can't convince them of your worth through achievement or service or sacrifice. Some people are so invested in their version of reality that they'll deny evidence, reject truth, choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable growth, and that's okay. Their blindness isn't your responsibility to fix. My brother brother had said I could disappear and no one would notice. He'd meant it as a cruel joke, a dismissive jab, one more way to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. But he'd accidentally given me the greatest gift imaginable. He'd given me permission to disappear, to walk away, to stop carrying the weight of their dysfunction. I'd taken that permission and transformed it into freedom. The money I'd taken had been important, not for the wealth it provided, but for what it represented. It was tangible proof that I had value, that I could claim what was mine, that I didn't have to accept whatever scraps they decided to throw my way. It was self-preservation made manifest. But the real wealth, the thing that had actually changed my life, wasn't in any bank account. It was in the boundaries I'd established, the self-respect I'd reclaimed, the understanding that my worth existed independent of anyone else's acknowledgement. I'd disappeared from the people who couldn't see me, and in that disappearance, I'd finally become visible to the person who mattered most, myself. My phone buzzed with a message from Tyler. "Thanks for tonight. Love you, sis." I typed back, "Love you too." And I meant it. Not the obligatory love we're taught to feel for family because they're family, but the genuine love that comes from witnessing someone's growth, from choosing to connect despite the past, from building something new on the ruins of something broken. The toxic family I'd grown up in was gone. Some members had changed, some had been left behind, some had transformed into people I could actually have relationships with. But the system itself, the hierarchy and favoritism and manipulation that had been dismantled. And in its place, I'd built something better. Not perfect, not without complications, but real and honest and based on mutual respect rather than obligation. My brother had been wrong about so much, but he'd been right about one thing. I had disappeared. I'd vanished from the family structure that had tried to keep me small and invisible and convenient, but I'd reappeared as someone they could no longer ignore, diminish, or control. I'd reappeared as myself, fully visible, fully valued, fully free. And that disappearance, that transformation, that journey from invisible to seen, had been worth every difficult moment, every painful decision, every boundary I'd had to enforce. I'd vanished from their world and found my own, and I was never going back. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you experienced the pain of being valued only for what you could provide, not for who you were? Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from people who refuse to see us. Sometimes disappearing is the only way to finally be found. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? How did you find the strength to choose yourself? Thank you for listening to my journey. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story touched you. Your support means everything.